Hi, everybody. Happy Friday and welcome to Lit Chick. We have an amazing guest this week. Alexis Daria is here, author of A Lot Like Adios, which I love so much. I'm going to be fangirling this whole episode. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about Alexis. Alexis writes stories about successful Latinx characters and their occasionally messy familias. Her 2020 release, You Had Me at Hola, was a national bestseller, Target Diverse Book Club pick, and a New York Times Editor's Choice pick. Alexis is a lifelong New Yorker who loves Broadway musicals and pizza. Emily Henry, #1 New York Times bestselling author of The People We Meet on Vacation, said that it's charming, sexy spitfire of a novel. And I also love this quote from Diana Munoz Stewart, who said that its sexy situations will singe your eyebrows, which I thought was such a great quote, and I completely agree. This book is hot and so well done. I was like riveted. I was telling Alexis I spent the whole night just devouring this book. If you're looking for an escape, which God knows we all need right now, this is the perfect choice for you, as is probably You Had Me at Hola, which is Alexis's first book in this Primas of Power series, which I'm so excited to hear more about. So Alexis, could you tell us just first a little bit about A Lot Like Adios, just a quick little snippet summary of what's going on in this rom-com?
Sure, and thank you so much for having me on here, Alex.
Sure.
I'm excited to chat today. So A Lot Like Adios just came out this week, and it is about childhood best friends who haven't seen each other in over a decade. And they kind of had like a little bit of a thing like right before they left, but didn't go anywhere because he was leaving forever. But now they are back in each other's lives and they are working together on a project, and they are stuck in the same house together because they don't want anybody else to know that he's there. So there's a lot of like sexy and funny things that ensue as a result of that. And then their families get involved and then it really gets complicated.
It does. And I think that these two protagonists are so wonderful. You've got Gabe, who is based out of Los Angeles, right? And he owns a gym, which is sort of kind of losing control over what the idea of that space is. And then you have Michelle, who I love. I think Michelle is part of the reasons I love this book so much. She tells it like it is. Yeah. She owns her narrative. She knows exactly what she wants. She's not afraid to say it. That is so refreshing. I am inspired by her after reading this book. And yes, they come together at Michelle's house in the Bronx and things get complicated pretty quickly, which I also like. This is not totally a slow burn here, right from the get-go. We got some nice action going on. And one thing I thought that was really interesting about this book that I wanted to talk to you about, because I talked to a lot of rom-com authors on this show, is we actually start with Gabe's narrative here. We get his perspective throughout the book, and I think we end on it too. So I was just kind of curious, is that a strategy that you've used in previous books? Is that something you like to show both the love interest and our main character, or they're kind of given equal sort of narrative weight throughout? How did you reach that decision?
Well, I typically write dual POV, so you're getting both of the main characters' perspectives in the book. However, I typically start with whoever the kind of main character is, whoever has the bigger growth arc in the book is usually who I will start the book with in that first chapter in their POV. And working on this, I definitely thought it was Michelle, and then the more I worked on it, I realized, oh no, it's actually Gabe. Gabe needs to start this story. This is his journey. He's the one coming back home. So that was a big part of why we open up with Gabe's POV.
I love that. Yeah, it's really a homecoming story in the sense that he's literally coming home to his neighborhood in the Bronx, but also kind of coming home to himself and the things that he maybe lost in the years that he was separated from Michelle. So that was so easy to trace. And also it was really hot to get the man's perspective and the woman's perspective switching off. I thought that made the whole experience a lot more complicated, but round and really really wonderful. So I want to commend you on that for sure. Yeah. That's a huge skill, and it's really tricky to juggle all these things. I also wanted to talk about this awesome element you have in the book, which I've seen you kind of mention a couple times, but there's a story within this book, which is so commendable also to pull off. It's hard enough to write one novel. You've managed to come up with two storylines, and that we have Celestial Destiny, which is sort of, I think, our Star Wars, maybe you tell us, inspired sort of sci-fi world. So Gabe and Michelle are writing this fan fiction together in high school as a sort of way to bond. They absolutely love the content, so they're inspired to do a spin-off of that. And then it's this fan fiction or this kind of alternate universe that brings them back together in the end. So I would just love to know how you came up with that, whether you did kind of a story arc for that book as well. It's a really cool idea.
Yeah, well, I kind of set myself up for this in the first book with You Had Me at Hola, where I showed the scenes of the show that they were on
Right.
As interstitials. So there's a story within a story, and you're kind of getting almost two love stories in that book. So I said, okay, I'm going to have to carry this through the series. And with Adios, I knew I wanted it to be a fanfic that was something that they had bonded over when they were younger, and that was going to serve as flashbacks to who they were when they were younger,
Right.
throughout the story. But it was a lot of work in both cases, really, to figure out how exactly I was going to show these scenes. So with Adios, and this is not a spoiler, I came up with multiple sci-fi ideas for like what the story could be, and I did outlines for all of them and sample scenes, writing them. And like it just wasn't working. And I had already written the book at this point too, and I had spots like where these scenes were going to go, and I was like, I can't get this right.
Right.
And what I realized is that it wasn't the scenes so much, because I mean, this is fanfic of a made-up show, so like who really cares?
Nobody's going to be like, I don't think he was holding that. Whatever.
Exactly. You know, Gabe and Michelle care very much, but for the reader, I felt like that was maybe too much of a stretch.
Yeah.
But who we do care about is Gabe and Michelle. So I used their planning sessions from when they were talking about it, and just kind of infused like their dynamic and who they were when they were 15, 16, 17 years old, and just little bits about their life. And that was really what was more important to show. So that's what ended up going into those spots.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And also fascinating just from a craft perspective. I know we have a lot of writers watching too, that you kind of did a placeholder for the interstitials and then decided I'm going to come back and make sure that whatever is going in there is most effective for the story. Would you say that's right?
Yeah, like I'm a big outliner, so I knew what the beats were and kind of where a scene was going to have to go to complement what just came before and telegraph what was about to come next. So I had already figured all of that out. And actually with writing You Had Me at Hola, I could not write the book until I figured out how those scenes were going to go and what was going to happen in them. So I had to figure that out first, and I wrote them as I wrote the book. With this one, luckily, I was able to write the book because they do take place at different times.
Right.
So whereas with Hola, it's like they are doing that in real time. They're filming those scenes in real time. So this one was a little bit easier for me to kind of finish the book, turn that in for edits, and then while I was waiting for them,
figure that out.
Keep figuring it out. Yeah.
Good. Yeah. Make it anytime you can make it a little easier for yourself. I feel like take that opportunity. And I'm curious too, because you brought it up. So You Had Me at Hola is the first book in this Primas of Power series that has Ava, Jasmine, and Michelle kind of as the three primas, right? The three cousins. And I'm kind of curious, you want to give our viewers just a little summary of You Had Me at Hola and let us know kind of how you came up with this trilogy, which is basically what it is. Although you can definitely read them as a standalone. You don't need to know information from one or the other.
Yeah, each book definitely works as a standalone. It's a complete romance in each one. So You Had Me at Hola is about Jasmine. So this is the first in the series. Jasmine is a soap opera actress, and she ends up on the remake of a telenovela with Ashton Suarez, who is a big telenovela star, and he's also her grandma's favorite actor. So they are together, and that's more of a slow burn kind of book, where they are on the show together, but they both kind of have all these other career things going on that prevent them from really connecting backstage. But of course, they are playing love interests on the show, so they're connecting on set, until they start like hanging out behind the scenes.
Right.
Of course. So that's the first book. the premise for the series really started with the idea of the primas of power, these three cousins who are kind of reconnecting. Jasmine has been away, she comes back, and just showing that cousin bond. And then I knew that each book was going to be one of the primas falling in love.
I love that. Yeah, it's such a cool idea. But you didn't have the concept of all three of them figured out at first, or maybe
no, just kind of tropes.
Okay.
I had this image of the three of them kind of coming back together and talking about kind of where they were in their love lives, all being around 30 years old at the start. And then
awesome.
from there, you know, it was like, I knew there was going to be like a single dad trope. There was going to be a former friends trope. Still working out Ava's. It's not going how I thought, but she's the third.
Well, it rarely does with writing, but that's still amazing to see. And I think it's so useful too to have the other cousins as sort of like places, foils for the main character in whichever book you're reading. I know Ava and Jasmine have really strong opinions about Gabe and whether or not Michelle should pursue this relationship again, because he did leave her the first time and we're not totally sure if we can trust him, but gosh, we want to, I think, in this book. So I think that that's a really smart idea, and it's kind of a fun sort of little Easter egg to see mentions of the other book pop up in this, which I know fans of the trilogy probably really appreciate too, and I know I did. So I wanted to talk to you too, Alexis, and you can respond to this however you'd like, but I am so curious as somebody working on a rom-com myself. This book is hot, like truly hot. I know my friend Hannah Orenstein read it too, and all of the reviews are just like, whoo! I want to know, like, what is your secret? How do you approach these scenes? Like, I think that part of the reason that they work so well is you're such a fabulous writer, and so we have the character development sort of match the sexual and romantic arc as well. But I was wondering if you felt comfortable telling us a little bit about how you kind of draft that stuff and how you come up with it, and anything that you've discovered. What's the secret to doing it? Since I think you're like honestly one of the best I've ever read. So.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I won't lie, it's work, you know, and it's, I think, really about craft. Like I said, I'm a big outliner. So I always think about what are those kind of main points along the romance arc that are going to kind of warrant these kinds of scenes. You know, in Hola, it was more of a slow burn. So I knew that we were going to have like that kind of midpoint where that's where everything was going to kick off with them.
Yeah.
And that's typically what I do is I kind of like get them toward the midpoint, and then from there it goes on. But with Gabe and Michelle, they were just such a different kind of couple, and they have such a history. I was working on, so I meet with some other writers in the mornings, and we will do work sprints over Zoom or Google Hangouts together. And I was like, you guys, I think this is going to be an end of Act 1 sex scene. Like, I think that's where they're going. And then from there, it's like going to go, just that's going to be a big part of the rest of the book for them. Because that's kind of the way that they allowed themselves to be together. It was definitely one of those like, okay, we're doing this for while we're here, and then afterwards, like, who knows what.
Yeah, right.
So that really was kind of the guiding principle in plotting this book. And when I got to that point, it was such a difficult scene to write because it starts off with an argument. So to make sure that the tension is there, that the sexual tension is there, that the humor and the emotions and like all of that are still working together to actually get them into this scene. I must have rewrote those scenes like 30 times because it just wasn't.
Hear that, writers? 30 times. Yeah. Practice, practice, practice.
And I hated it. I don't like it when it's difficult.
Yeah, of course. Who does?
So it was a struggle. And I did have to ask my editor for help. So that is also my advice. Ask for help early. Don't wait like I did. I waited way too long to ask for help.
Yeah. I mean, it totally pays off. But I think it is challenging too. Part of the reason that slow burn is appealing for people drafting rom-com is that you have a place that you're going to get to. And if you get there fast, knowing that everything has to function like a dominoes and you're, always be escalating or whatever, that if you start here, then, you have to go here and here and here, and figuring out where to go from that sounds like a real challenge. But I think what I loved so much about the sex scenes in this book is that they're all really different. I think they all really enforce this wonderful thing that sex is, something deeply personal. It doesn't have to be one thing or a box that gets ticked. It's complicated. And I think that you've done such a good job of expressing that here. So 30 times, pay it off.
Thank you.
Yeah. That's really wonderful. So I'd love to talk to you a little bit about this planning, because I know you had me at Ola, came out in 2020, which is a challenging year. And now we're here in 2021. We've got another book coming out. Are you just going and going and going? Like, have you plotted these things out in your writing? What's your writing schedule look like? And how do you keep yourself sane? I'm curious, because the output is so fantastic, but it is a lot, right?
Yeah. And it takes me a long time to think about what is going to go into the book. I'm like really trying to embrace this part of my process, because I always think it should go faster than it does. Because when I get around to drafting, that actually does happen very quickly.
Yeah.
But the planning part and really making sure that I know the characters well, that I know who they are before they hit page 1 is really important for me, because otherwise I just kind of like, I don't know what I'm doing if I don't know who they are. So I spend a lot of time on that. And like, it's been really hard this last year and a half. Writing a book is hard anyway.
Yeah.
I have been very lucky. Like, my family's all safe. I have a place where, I haven't been able to go out. I live in New York, and it's been very boring.
Yeah.
Not being able to engage in everything that's here. But, I do have like the time and the space to write, but it's been hard to focus. And that's like what I need to be able to write, is that kind of like intense period of focus. So for me, it's A, knowing that about myself, and then B, facilitating that in my schedule. So when I know, okay, I'm ready to write this book, or my deadline is coming up, one or the other, I've done all the planning, I clear my plate.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, these next few weeks, put up the away message on my inbox. I tell my agent, I tell my editor, I tell my family and my friends. I'm like, nobody expect to hear from me until this book is done. I buy a bunch of like frozen dinners in the freezer, like whatever my current deadline snacks are, just things like that, like whatever kind of quick meals or food I can get that's like good brain food also. And then I just put my head down and I work.
Yeah.
I wish I could be one of those people who gets up every morning, writes one chapter, and then in like 2 months they have a book. I am not.
Yeah.
I'm not.
And it's huge to be able to like, say that. Not the thing that works for somebody else may not work for you. I think the hunkering down place is so important. And the plotting stuff is really important too. We ask often on Lit Chick, are you a pantser or a plotter? I think I already know the answer to that question from you, Alexis. But I think that, that thinking time and that planning time is just as important as the drafting time. And one of the things that I really admired about this book from a craft perspective is that your characters feel like they've spent a lot of time thinking about themselves too. I don't mean that they're like myopic in any sense, but they really have a good sense of self. Like they know who they are and they know what they want. And I think from a reader's perspective, that's so comforting, because you can let go of like any fears or doubts that you might have. You're able to ride it along with them, because you're like, okay, I'm going out with Michelle tonight. She knows what she wants. Like, she's going to take me there. And so I think that's probably a result of your really careful plotting here.
Yeah, I hope so. I'm glad it comes across.
Yeah, it definitely does. The hard work is worth it. I know it's like a long process, but it's something that's really, really impressive. So I want to talk to, just because I know this is a huge Alexis Daria, queen of the covers, is in my mind on my Instagram. Whenever I see these covers, I'm like, oh my God, give me. So I know you also have a background too, am I right, in design and computer arts. So did you have a big say in this cover? It's a little different than some of the other illustrated covers that we've been seeing in this rom-com space right now. I'd love to know kind of about the provenance of this design here, which is just so evocative of the story and the people. Yeah.
Yes, I have a background in fine arts and computer arts, so I have a lot of opinions about cover design. And I knew that we were going to have illustrated covers for the series, and I was like, that's fine. However, there was one artist who I have in mind, and I just want us to get him. Like, he's the only one who I can see for this series because he's already doing so much of what I'm looking for. So the artist who does the covers is Bo Feng Lin, and you should follow him on Instagram. He's amazing. And we were luckily able, like, Avon was on board with it, and Bo said yes. And I've just been so lucky to be able to get these covers because that was what I was going for. You know, I said, I don't want it to just look like everybody else's. I want it to look like my book. And I want it to speak to what's inside. You know, these are romance novels. Like, I know we use the term rom-com and stuff, and it's kind of a marketing term, and that's fine. I do try to put humor into my books. I hope that people also laugh when they read them. But they are romance novels. That is the main arc of the book. So I wanted that to be clear when somebody picks it up. And also they're high heat, they're not closed door. So especially with Gabe and Michelle, I was like, this is an even hotter book than the previous one. And I want people to know what they're in for. So if that's not their thing, that's fine.
And then you don't get those crazy Goodreads comments. They're like, why does this book have sex in it? I'm
like, let's let people know what they're in for from the beginning.
Sure.
You know, I always try to telegraph it in the blurb too. But like on the cover, I was like, we really need to make it clear that these two people are like so into each other, that they have such amazing chemistry. So there's like these little details, like there's like the shirt grab here and the way they're looking at each other. So he just captured that so perfectly.
And Gabe has that perfect 5 o'clock shadow. That
perfect, yes, and the shaved part,
the fade, yes. An important detail, important. And I also think the covers are so New York too. I like can't totally explain why. Maybe because it's a little bit more graphic, but I love to talk about New York in this book too, and the kind of like New York LA divide, which is sort of Gabe's big existential crisis, right? So he has this gym in LA, which is very popular with the celebrity Hollywood set. And then he's trying to open a gym in New York, or not trying, but being asked to open a gym in New York. Yeah. And this sort of division of the coasts plays a big role in this story. And New York totally comes alive in this. First of all, I just have to say off the bat, Michelle driving in New York is my hero. I was like following these scenes. I was like, damn girl, get that parking spot. She seems so unfazed. Meanwhile, I would be like weeping, like so impressed. And you have these also two kind of spaces in New York, right? You have the Bronx, which is a lot more family oriented, much more residential, where both of them grew up. They've got backyard space to hang out in. And then you have Michelle's apartment in Manhattan, which is sort of teeny and this other space. So yeah, I would love to hear a little bit about your relationship to the city and how you kind of chose these places. Are you big on setting? Like, do you find the street in the Bronx that you're trying to replicate?
So I would always say I'm not good at setting. And like, I hate writing setting details. Like I always like put it in with brackets, like write setting details here. And then like in copy edits, they're like, are you going to fill this in?
You're like, no.
I'm like, oh, I guess I should finally do that. But so that was another piece that I wanted to show about, you know, these families and these characters in these books, is that Michelle and Jasmine, you know, on one side of their family, they are from this big Puerto Rican family in the Bronx, which is what my mom's side of the family is there. And I wanted to capture that feeling. And also, I grew up in the Bronx, and, you know, I think people have this image of New York City as like only Manhattan and only like Midtown.
Yeah.
Or, you know, only the East Village. And New York is really, you know, there are lots of us who were born here, who grew up here, who still live here, if we can afford to or are lucky. And, you know, had, you know, or grew up in a house. Like there's lots of houses in the outer boroughs.
Totally.
So there are these different kinds of experiences, but we're all still New Yorkers. So that's kind of what I was going for with this, with showing that. And then I was like, somebody's going to call me out on how they never take the subway. But honestly, like, I'm in my 30s. These characters are in the 30s. I'm so over taking the train, especially since like COVID and everything. I'm like, oh God, I never want to do that again.
Taking the train can be dark. I lived in deep Bushwick when I was commuting to my first publishing job, and I got on that L train. And I think that like the negative thoughts of sitting on a long train from Brooklyn stay with you. That is just truly a pit of hell if you let it be. So
well, yeah, because it's always a surprise too. Like, am I going to be able to get home today?
Right, exactly. It could just stop. Yeah.
And then, you know, when I was living in the Bronx, I went to high school in Manhattan. So that was like a trek to and from every day. And then I lived in Brooklyn and worked in Manhattan. And like, so anyway, Michelle has a car because she does go back and forth a lot. And I think that is like more common than some people might think. It is hard to have a car in the city, but it is not impossible. And especially if you are going to the outer boroughs more often.
Then it's worth it. Yeah.
So yeah, it was really like showing these neighborhoods. I did kind of pick out around where Gabe and Michelle, like where their houses would have been. But I didn't want to put the street name in the book just in case, you know, I don't know who actually lives in those houses, so, or what they really look like.
People are Googling. I would have
houses that I know of or I've seen, or friends' houses from when I was a kid. Same thing with Michelle's studio apartment.
They totally come alive. And I think that like even reading details about like the basement, right, which is where so much of the steamy stuff happens. I'm sure people unfamiliar with New York would be like, you can have a basement in a full residential house. But yeah, that was one of my favorite things about living in New York City, is just walking around and finding these little neighborhoods which feel like they could be anywhere, or just a lot different than the stereotype that you have in your mind. Like Ditmas Park is a place like that, where I remember walking over there at Christmas time, and it could have been Long Island. Like, it was a neighborhood. And I was like, it's a big city out there. And also, I think it's important, along with setting, to acknowledge that this is a Latinx rom-com or romance novel. I like the way you say that. Rom-com is becoming a little like, it's so sticky in my mouth. It's a romance novel. And these characters are of Latinx descent, but also Michelle's half Italian. Which I think was really interesting. And you did such a great job of like weaving these cultures in without, I think, you know, making it seem too recognizable. They felt like such real people to me. And I love this scene that you have at this quinceañera when they're dancing together, and they are dancing like nobody is watching. The music in this is really strong, really palpable. I felt like that was like one of the flavors that stood out the most to me. Was there like stuff you were listening to while you were writing this? Is that something that you do while you write to get that kind of groove?
Yeah.
Oh, you also have a great moment of Pony's genuine Pony. I won't spoil where that comes up, but when that song hits, you know what's coming.
Yeah, I mean, I have playlists for all of my books. I never used to be able to write with music with lyrics. Playing, but now like I can. So I put together these playlists that really capture the vibe of the book, or you know, whether it's through the sound of the song or the lyrics, or if there is a song that kind of matches a particular scene for me. And one of the songs that really helped me kind of get a sense of the vibe of this book in general was Sway by Luis Fonsi, who wrote this. So I listened, like he did Sway with this show Songland, which I didn't watch the show, but my friend Sabrina Soul, who is also a romance writer, I think shared the song, and I was like, oh my God, this is it. This is like Michelle and Dave.
The song, right.
Just like the sound of it. So I listened to that song a lot. I also listened to Despacito a lot of times, Maluma, you know, a lot of music. And you know, I don't know, like, I think we'd have to have like more of like a remix of that kind of song for this particular scene, because but they're dancing bachata. But that was kind of where, you know, and for that scene, it's like one paragraph that describes the dance. I spent 4 hours researching.
4 hours. Listen, my dear viewers.
paragraph.
She's not messing around. Okay. Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. I mean, I find that, you know, we share a love of musical theater. I find music to be such a transporting kind of sense. And so sometimes when I'm writing, I will just play the same thing on repeat because staying in that headspace feels so important to like what's coming across on the page. So
yeah, sorry to my neighbors.
Well,
maybe didn't want to hear that song.
We're all listening to Despacito for like 400 years anyway, so it's like part of our brain matter at this point. But I think that that's so great, and like, you know, they're sexy songs, but I think that that really helps the atmosphere as well. So yeah, that is really, really amazing. And okay, so you can't tell us quite. I was going to ask about your next book because we're getting to that point. But if you don't want to share, no pressure. Can you give us any sort of like little nibbles?
So it is about Ava.
Okay. Sorry.
It's like every time I say something, I'm like, it's going to maybe have this thing. I like end up taking that thing out.
Yeah. If you're like really in it too, it can be hard to.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know. She is such a hard person to know.
Yeah.
She's like the really perfect one.
That's what I was going to say, because I was reading, you know, the other books, and she seems to me like very relatable. I think that there's a lot of parts of Ava that I get, but also a little like intractable and a little mysterious and a little guarded, which is really hard, you know, when you're trying to get inside that character, but also contrasts really nicely with Jasmine and Michelle too.
Yeah. So. And then part of the arc of all of these books is also just letting people in more, even the people who you are closest to. You know, we still don't always show every part of ourselves. Yeah. And for both Jasmine and Michelle, they both had to really hit points where they had to let their cousins in more in order to be able to help support them emotionally. You know, which is scary. Even if with the people we love the most, it can be scary. So that's, I guess, one of like the maybe core themes of this series, which is not what I set out to do, but here we are.
Here we are, yeah.
And with Ava, I think she's 33 at the time of her story. She's divorced. She's a middle school teacher. And she's like putting her life back together, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, maybe the third book will be the greatest challenge, but maybe also a great success to kind of figure that stuff out. That's what's so fun about all of this stuff. And I think that what you said about people becoming less guarded is so important in these books too. I mean, these are complicated characters and their families are complicated too. I mean, one thing we haven't talked about yet is the reason that Gabe is not in New York, because he has a pretty big falling out with his family members. Who come right back for him. I love that scene so much. I hope I'm not spoiling it, where his mom just gets straight to cooking. It's just like, yes, you know, family is there for you through thick and thin. And I think that that's something that absolutely comes through in these books too, but also creating a space for maybe the next generation to be able to talk about the things that maybe their parents weren't able to, or, you know, create a safer space for those kinds of feelings to come up. So it's a lot of tension, but I think it's done well.
Yeah, and there's a couple points in the book where Gabe thinks about the adage, like, you can never go home again.
Right.
And I think for some people it is true. And actually, to protect yourself, you do need to have those strong boundaries. You know, if your family is not accepting of who you are. Yeah. And I really try to make clear in this that Gabe recognizes that as well, but he does see the difference in his parents from where he was before. And it's kind of like a gradual thing. Right. In the story with them kind of, I don't want to give too much away.
No, totally.
I want to be clear that like, I think there definitely are situations where the best thing that a person can do is just not communicate with their family.
Sure. And it's not black and white, and it's not, you know, easy to say. I think that that's why people love romance stories. And I think, you know, why people love reading books is you can live in that gray area a little bit, and you do get, you know, a satisfactory ending, but it's always a little bit, you know, with something that's got to give. So I think that that's the mark of a really great book in this genre. I want to take some time for questions. I think I saw a couple questions in the comments that came up. So Julie will pull those up for us. Oh, hey, great. Here's one. What has been the most surprising feedback you've received? That's interesting.
I mean, that could be in reviews or in edits.
Right. Yeah, choose to interpret that how you would like to with your review.
My editor, after that first draft, felt that Michelle was really mean.
Okay.
And I was like, yeah, she is.
Sorry.
Yeah. Like, well, maybe we want to have her like not intentionally tricking him.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was something that I worked on. And in terms of reviews, I don't really like. I'm not reading Goodreads. I'm not like looking at all that stuff. I just kind of see what I'm tagged in on Instagram, and I just kind of skim it. And I'm like, is it good? Okay, I'll like it. Thank you. So the most surprising feedback. I guess like what's always the most surprising thing is like that people have gotten what I've tried to put out. Because, you know, we spend so much time on a book and then you put it out there and it's totally possible that someone is going to completely like not get it.
Yeah.
You know, what are you doing here? Like, I don't care about these people. I don't care about their fanfic, you know, whatever it is. But when people like really get it, and then sometimes they'll comment on something where I'm like, oh, was I really doing that? Like, I didn't even like think about that as much. Like, that's always the most surprising piece, and also like really lovely.
Sure, probably so gratifying, especially I think this year, which has been so insular and we've been so at home and not having those sort of normal touch points outside. To get that shown back to you and to connect with the readers on that level must feel really gratifying, I would imagine. I think the book is super effective for that reason. And it's so funny to hear that Michelle, you know, needed to tone it down. She does trick Gabe, but she justified it. I mean, that's the way that you know that these characters are developed so well, and something that, you know, I try to figure out in my writing too, is they can take these big swings, right? Like, it is a novel after all. We're not saying that this is exactly real life. But if they're able to take big swings and you believe them, it's also just a testament to, you know, how much we're along for the ride. I think that, was I a little like, oh, Michelle, you're not really going to bring Gabe to your house. But at the same time, I was like, okay, girl, get it. Like, you know, she made a choice, and she made a strong choice. And that happened so early in the novel, and we're already, you know, on board, I think is huge. So I think you should feel really, really great about that choice. I didn't feel like she was mean at all. And I think that, you know, there's probably so much pressure too when you're writing a character who's Puerto Rican and Italian, who's coming with, you know, all of this other baggage of culture, to be wary of making a character come across a particular way. I think that can be a thorny issue. So you want to still, you know, own the character and make her authentic and true, and find a balance there, which is really what I think it's all about. I think Michelle does know what she wants, but we also see her thought process, and we see her having doubts, and that makes all of her big swings, I think, all the more believable too, because we see how she arrived at it.
That's a craft thing as well, you know, like you can have characters doing things that the reader might not necessarily agree with, but if you can really show, like within reason, if you can really show their motivation for that and why, who they are as a person informs why this action of theirs makes sense, you're like, okay, Michelle, I wouldn't do that, but I totally see why you would.
Yeah.
And that's our job as authors, to do that internal work for the character and actually put it on the page so that the reader is on board with them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like mildly tricking him into staying
at
her parents' house.
She mildly tricked him, but he kind of wanted to. I think that's what makes Gabe so endearing, is that you get these moments where he's just like, you know, I really shouldn't be doing this, but she looks so good, and we're already here, and I've already come so far, and you're just like, yeah, just go for it. And, you know, also Michelle has a fear of people leaving her again. And so what's a better strategy than to trap them in your house?
Right.
A little bit, you know? We also know he's not going anywhere. And it really helps with the dramatic tension of the novel too, because, you know, everything is kind of in that boiling pot, which is really useful with his parents right next door. I think that that's another genius plot point. This isn't giving too much away, but Gabe is, of course, hiding from his family, and he can see them through the window in the house right next door, because even though you can have, you know, a residential home in the Bronx, you still probably only have, whatever, 4 or 5 feet between each house. So, yeah, I think that is super duper effective. Well, yeah, Alexis, it's been so great talking with you. I really... Please go check out Alexis's Instagram, and her website is also incredible. The illustrations are everywhere. I love, like, not even just on the book, but there's a little illustrated Alexis that you can find floating around the internet. Really just makes, like, all of these books totally come to life. And I'm so excited for the 3rd book. I will absolutely be buying a copy, and please go out there and buy a copy of A Lot Like Adios, or You Had Me at Hola. You can get the whole Primas of Power package. We're gearing up for, you know, colder weather, and I could not recommend, like, a better activity than sitting at home with these books. They are so much fun. The last kind of thing I wanted to ask you, Alexis, is there an indie bookstore in New York that you want to direct folks to, or anywhere that they should be buying these books from?
I went up earlier this week to sign copies of A Lot Like Adios at Word Up Community Bookstore, which is in Washington Heights.
Okay, cool.
They might still have some left, some signed copies. But if not, I did leave them with some signed book plates as well. So you can contact them to see if they still have those. But also, they're just a great community bookstore, women of color owned, and a lot of Latinx booksellers there. So there's a great one to support.
That's awesome. Well, I like to hear that there might be some left too. That is good sign. I hope that this pub week has been good. I know you've been super busy, but we're all just really excited about the book. You've gotten such wonderful praise, and so I'm just excited to follow it along on this journey. And I hope that our viewers are excited to dip into this. I promise you will not be disappointed. There is something for everybody in this book, because you have such an amazing male protagonist, such an amazing female protagonist, an amazing setting, and lots of great heat. So I think that this is going to be one of your faves on the bookshelf this year. It's definitely one of mine for sure. And I'm so appreciative of you coming on Lit Chick, Alexis. We hope to have you back maybe when we've got Ava's Untitled book. Yeah. You've got Hola, you've got Adios. Which is the next? Benvenidos? Where are we going with this?
I think it's going to have Amor in the title.
Amor, okay. Cut straight to the chase. Yes, I love it. I love it. Well, I'm so excited for you, and happy writing. Sending you all positive vibes as you kind of crack the Ava nut that you created. That's the fun thing about writing. You're like, why is this so hard? Oh, wait, I made this problem for myself. But
Ava, why are you like this?
She needed to be like this, and she will show you. She will show you the way. Sometimes I get very woo-woo about this book stuff, but Ava will appear to you and shine the light. Please. Ava, if you're out there, you hear us. Yes, more and more. All right. Well, thank you so much, Alexis. This was so much fun. Thank you so much to all of our viewers for tuning in. Next week, we're actually going to be off with Lit Chick, but we will have Rachel Levy-Lesser making some challah with another guest here to talk about their memoir about braided. So we'll see you soon. And I hope everyone has a really great and safe weekend.
Bye.
Bye, folks.